Select Board agenda for Monday night, January 29th is available. It's 6:35. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
Not that I know of, but 28th is the agenda is for the 28th. I think you said the 29th.
Did I look at the wrong one? Did I say?
28th.
Today's January 28th.
Yep.
What did I say?
I think you said 29th.
Oh, sorry, January 28th. Okay, 6:30. So, at the request of Select Board members, we want to have a first look and discussion on capital budgeting. And the fire station, as an example, has a great spreadsheet because they're buying pumpers and ambulances and oxygen breathing equipment and all that, and they have a nice spreadsheet. And Dean has been doing some research and we've been talking, so we have an example to start the discussion of the capital budget. So we look at what are our properties: town hall, library, senior center, the beach facilities, wastewater, Thompson's Point wastewater, etc. So, you know, things like you look under town hall, if you're looking at your sheet, you got the roof, you got the heat and air conditioning, exterior, interior painting. Those are the kind of things that we should plan ahead for. And so this has sort of been laid out, just looking for your comments, what you think. Is this the kind of capital budget you guys are thinking about?
I think it is. I think we need to go out for 5 years, maybe if we have to have 2 pages. Because you're talking about things with, 10, 20-year lifspan.
Like the roof, for example. Yeah, that's a 25-year life. It's too bad we can't, if you turn the page, you can't get all the facilities on like the fire and rescue has theirs. But just have page 1, page 2 maybe, and run it on the opposite direction.
I'll let you know, after I handed out the packet last week, I revisited some of it, also actually talking with Carrie. And I thought about a couple of changes that I did start to make and I put into the version that's on the table and also on the screen. I wondered about adding in expenses that are paid through the general fund. You know, initially what was in here was a lot of assets that we paid or bought or will pay through reserve funds, which are at the bottom. And so similar to the Fire and Rescue Reserve Fund, my intent there was to be able to track what the balance of each fund is and how much is getting paid from each fund or will have to be deposited in the fund in order to be paid. But some of the expenses are paid through the general fund. For example, if the bond for the library addition is approved, there's annual expenses that will be paid through the general fund. So if you see under library and then down the list at the bottom, I added the addition. So the cost of that is, $700,000 to the town, $700,000 raised through other sources. And then there's annual expenses associated with that. So it's not paid out of a reserve fund, but it's an annual capital expense. And then I added fire and rescue down at the bottom. I haven't had a chance to fill in numbers there, but you've approved for the proposed budget $100,000 in FY20, and we could expand that out as far as the fire and rescue sheet goes. So you have those numbers, basically pull those numbers into here.
That comes out of our budget.
Yes.
The payment of that 100,000, which goes toward their reserve
It's
fund.
in the general fund budget to pay into the reserve fund.
Well, I appreciate that work, Dean, for doing this, and everyone else for being part of this. This was scheduled a month from now, but I thought it was really important that Lane be here. He's got a lot of, experience leading up to these numbers and understands them going forward, so I think,
So you
great.
mentioned that there's some statutes if we were to adopt a capital budget.
There are statutes that deal with capital budgets, and, I don't know that you necessarily have to adopt it, but that was just to be aware of. If you, a capital budget. I mean, it's not it's a tool you can use. I think the statutes for a formal adoption are geared towards if you wanted to develop something like impact fees, which would rely on the capital budget to create a funding mechanism for some kind of capital improvement. Then it's important that the adoption go through a formal process.
It says capital projects to be undertaken, the capital budget shall list and describe capital budgets undertaken during the coming fiscal year. What did you mean by an impact fee? What's an impact fee?
The impact fee would be a fee that the town would adopt that would be levied on new development. So an example that actually has been done in the past in Charlotte would be a recreation fee. So if there's a new lot that's created through a subdivision, they would have to pay a recreation fee to, to be able to build out, whether it's the tennis courts or some other recreation infrastructure.
that's any dollar amount that we would want to set that we agreed on.
It has to be based on a standard, basically, for example, the current standard, how much infrastructure do we have based on the number of residents we currently have? And then as, that ratio would be applied towards any new development.
And what's the alternative if we didn't want to
Well,
go that
the alternative, we
route?
don't have to do that. That's an option.
That's an example. We don't do that with the planning budget. We just budget for it.
We just use this as kind of a,
Right, exactly.
I think it would also be good to have at some point by each heading on the left, which fund, if a fund applies. So when you're looking at your numbers, moving over, that you're working out of the cemetery fund or the highway fund.
It looks like for some of the populated values, they're in there. Like for the roof IR, and then the legends on the bottom left is indicating improvement and repair fund. But I agree that it'd be nice to see that as we populate the whole Excel spreadsheet.
I think we want to get this dialed in the way we want it before we think about officially approving it, because it could be a,
I think to use it as a tool to start with.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It'll gives you a picture of what needs to be done.
And it really should be called a capital expense budget. I think it's easier to understand what the whole, it just says capital budget. It's my inkling, I don't know, because this is our expense.
I don't know, I guess all of this would be capital.
Or maybe
As
it's an
opposed to
expense
to
budget.
maintenance.
Yeah, I mean, the phone system, yeah, maybe. Like the phone system?
I mean, you could
Kinda-
ask our Sullivan to
CPA.
weigh in on it, but I'm looking at most of these things. If you're gonna paint an entire building, that's probably I don't know, sometimes historically, I've had to pick a number, which was a threshold for whether it was capital or maintenance. It was
Yep.
just a dollar number. Sometimes I think it depends on what you're doing, and that would be a question for Sullivan of Powers, you know, tell them we're trying to come up with this and,
Worksheet.
But what's the difference? You're still, having this as a plan, whether it's an expense or capital, you're still going to have to make a decision to get the money.
I think it's more from an accounting
Oh,
perspective of
capital gets,
where you credit.
expenses
expenses.
you go off, you know, a yearly thing, capital stuff is tracked differently.
I think
And
it's
maybe we have to.
usually about the $5,000 level is considered a capital expense, but you're right, sometimes painting is considered more of a maintenance because you're not really, it's not necessarily improving the value of the property, it's basically just keeping the value of what's there,
But you could be looking forward to see, you
how
know,
much it costs.
when
So
it's,
the
later
reason I'm
on in
saying
life,
that
yeah.
is because capital will make some people think that we're building new stuff or improving things.
Right,
Because that's what the
right.
capital means. So if we're
yeah.
gonna include maintenance expenses, we should call it just a expense worksheet or something
Right,
like that to
yeah,
let us, so people don't get confused with that.
so what's a $50,000 roof? What's that? It's an expense, right?
expense, no matter what.
But it's probably a capital one. And I don't know enough about accounting to know the rules are gonna be different for a town than they are for private companies. And for 501s, I'm familiar with private industry, so I don't know the rules
Yeah, the
for capital.
I mean, I think they're out there, generally,
Yeah.
generally accepted practices for
And it's
governments.
gonna change
I'm
from
all for
time to
getting
time.
basic accountant.
Yeah, I think just to call to the accountant and Dean and maybe tell them what we're up to and give us some guidelines as to what's capital or, because I think it's a good idea if we know what future expenses are gonna be that,
Especially since, you know, the intent is not levying impact fees, it's as a budgeting tool.
Right, right,
That
right.
one's kind of off the table, I think, I agree with you.
Yeah.
But the capital versus expense, I guess, is an accounting issue, which,
I mean, it's, yeah,
I think
it
it's
can
a
be a
good
thing
idea.
depending on who and what you're talking about.
Well, just about everything somehow on paper. Maybe it's 2 pieces of paper.
Well,
you know,
I think it
capital
needs to
and
be at least 2 pieces.
Expenses.
Yeah, and
Wow.
we could have a maintenance.
Because somehow you want to get the fire department in here too, so you can come up with a bottom line, not have to refer to another report. So mix the two together somehow, or,
And then, because we know how much someone's gonna be paid 10 years from now with our wage policy, right? We know how, you know, everybody knows, well, we should know how much we're going to be
Well, it's
needing
approximate.
to.
It's approximate because the cost of living is very.
Well, I
somebody
know,
quits
it's
and you get a new
approximate,
person,
absolutely, right.
the wage rate could be significantly different for a first year versus a 15-year person.
Well, I'm just saying that we have other things that we can look ahead at and know what we're going to pay. Well, this is something else that we should be able to look forward at.
Yeah.
And know, so other people can budget some things,
Yeah.
you know. I would think it'd be great for you, Matt, being a young person in town and
Yeah,
kind
my
of
kids.
understand.
I
and-
wanna see them.
Right.
Well, I think it helps you project when
Right.
you're having to approve a bond. You know, what am I approving for the future, you know?
Right.
Am I overloading 10 years from now that I don't think I can afford, or?
so you want, what do you want the next step? Like, look at it every 6 weeks and kind of start filling in the blanks and, like you said, the 5-year, look out 5-year increments, maybe reverse it and make it a 2-page document?
Needs to be at
Yeah, I
5
think
and 10 years.
By shaving out maintenance things, as far as what Sullivan and Powers says, I think
Okay.
probably half of these vertical lines, half of the rows might disappear.
Onto
that-
another page.
Onto a maintenance schedule
Maybe
versus a
have a
capital
capital page and expense,
and a
and
maintenance.
a maintenance page.
And then that could also, once it flips and could all fit landscape, it may allow us to have another 4 years of annual, of forecasting.
Or do 5-year increments. After the first 5 years, like do 5-year increments.
Oh, yeah, that could,
Would be part of the plan and then do it. 5 and 5.
Yeah, something
I
to,
think it's important to go year by year because bond things are gonna stop and start. You finish paying one, you're gonna start paying another one, they overlap
you could
for
do
a couple
10
years.
years and then,
Do 10 individual years and then do maybe a skip of 5 and a 5 to just trying to length it out. What's going to happen within the next 5 years? Then in the next 5 years, they'll be crushed in there because there'll
Yeah.
be 5 years underneath one column, but it would give you an idea of what's going on. So you'd be able to put like you know, if you had like the roof and it was 25 years out, you'd be able to hit that with your 10 years plus 3 5-year terms. You'd be able to say, okay, 25 years from now, this is going to be an expense.
I'd also, when I was doing large data sets in the science field, having alternating gray line, white line makes these a lot easier to read.
You know, one thing I don't see on here is our responsibility, and that's the blacktop, the paving of, you know, our area, the library, the senior center. Is that something that comes up every 20 years kind of thing?
Mean the parking lot?
Yeah, just.
Yeah, actually, that's not in there.
I'm just thinking that might be something
Yep.
you might want to add.
There's definitely going to be things that are going to pop up that we're going to add to it in time.
How often does fire and rescue, once we settle on it, how often does fire and rescue look at this? Once every 6 months, kind of annually?
Because it has to be approved by members and stuff.
So we would use this as a working document. People ask questions, budget.
Yeah, I think we would look at it, I mean, the way they do it is they pick a members meeting and we're gonna go over that, you know, can we stick this out another year or something? Well, sometimes stuff shows up that you didn't count on, so.
Might be a nice primer to the budget process sometime relatively soon after town meeting and there's a new election of a board. That way, there's an introduction to some of the nuts and bolts and the global picture of the town's finances, but it's not budget season and allows a new board 6-7 months to kind of get comfortable before the budget decisions have to happen.
When,
So
when
sometime,
do you want to look at another iteration of this, like in a month from now, or?
I'm open.
I penciled it in for the February 25th meeting.
Okay.
If, you know, if there's something urgent that comes on, and it can bounce, but,
And we would call Sullivan and Towers and
Yeah.
ask them if we,
yeah.
whatever.
Do we have any other comments on this?
No, I really appreciate it.
That's good.
I think it's gonna be really great.
Great, cool.
Oh, that's good. That's the first item, that's good. 655 item. Resolution for bond votes to be held. You wanted to kind of restate what this means?
Sure. It's required in the statute when you're putting a bond vote to voters that the select board approve these resolutions that basically indicate that the proposed bonds are necessary. They're kind of called necessity resolutions. So it's pretty much just a pro forma document that the similar document was used when the bond for the pumper was approved 2 years ago, and it basically says, you know, the town needs this capital asset and can't pay for it out of operating funds, therefore you're putting the question of the bond to voters.
So this goes to the bond bank when it's time to take out a bond, or?
Well, yeah, I guess it's just part of the documentation that ultimately the town attorney uses to draft their opinion
I see.
on.
And you're looking for two separate motions to approve these?
Right.
Is there a motion? The first one is the ambulance.
Sure, I'll make the motion to approve the bond resolution as presented for the purchase of a new ambulance.
Is there any further discussion on that? All in favor, say aye. Aye. And the library?
I'll make the same motion for the library. To approve the bond resolution for the library edition as presented.
Okay. Any discussion with that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I think your copies in your packet. Do you want to sign those now?
Sure. I folded, is this an original, or just sign
yeah.
sign these here? Okay.
Do you want me to do the slides or the top? Or you can sit here and just talk. Okay, that's fine. So,
This is the public comment section. I'd like to let everybody know that a recent select board member, Winslow the Dew, who finished up about 4 years or so ago, passed away a couple days ago. He was really a dedicated select board member, and he was an expert on roads and bridges, and he worked for the state in a capacity that he lent a lot of good knowledge to us, so I want to make a recognition of that. And it's been a tough year for the family. They lost their son last year in a ski accident, and now Winslow, so it's sorry for their loss. Are there any other public comments? Is Julian here?
yeah.
Why don't you come forward, and then you can talk to us and be on microphone and camera. Yeah, you sit there, it picks up there.
Okay.
So why don't you just give us a 2-minute brief of your interest and why you'd like to be on the Select Park and Wildlife Commission?
Yeah, you threw a curveball on Winslow, I didn't know that, I'm sorry to hear that. I've done volunteer work on the Oversight Committee, trail maintenance mainly, and pulling invasives for a few years, and for some reason I enjoy that. And I love the park. I spend a lot of time hiking there and skiing there and admiring it as I drive by. And I retired about a month ago. I've got time on my hands, and that seemed to be something I'd like to do. The only particular interest I have in it is handicapped access. And I know it's written into the plan, but it doesn't really exist. And I think it's something that can be done from the Route 7 entrance there. So I'll advocate for that. But otherwise, I just be pulling buckthorn and honeysuckle and hopefully planting.
Do you get majority of the users from the Greenbush side or the Route 7 side?
Oh, I mean,
Greenbush, I mean, to the park.
Greenbush.
The Greenbush side, when you said handicap access, I would think more the Greenbush side, wouldn't you? Or-
Oh, no, sorry, I misunderstood you. No, the only way if you went in Greenbush, it's a narrow path, it would not be navigable at all in a wheelchair. But up by the Thorpe barn,
Yep.
it's pretty level. And my hope is that a few hundred yards in, the access past Thorpe barn is right along the ridge line, it's level. And there's a gravel path there, and it would work really well for wheelchairs in particular. But it would have to be closely monitored.
I think parking is, when the area up there was laid out, they moved that house up there. I think parking was allowed for the park, if I'm not mistaken. And so
That's the old Varney.
yeah, the Varney Farm.
Yeah, that hasn't been positioned yet.
Right. That's something to come when There's new owners there and things. But that's where the parking, I believe, is, yeah. Because we looked at access 2 or 3 years ago, and we didn't want to create another access because the high traffic there, high-speed traffic, the big trucks, so it's the same access as into the Bundy Farm. Anybody have any questions of Julian or other comments?
No, but I'm sure it's going to be great to have you on the
Thank you.
board. You girls are probably real happy about this one.
What am I getting into here?
I can imagine. That's good.
What's that?
Let me ask you, what's the term? I don't see it here, Dean.
Lifetime.
Lifetime term? Right. Would somebody like to make a motion to appoint Julian to a lifetime term of the Charlotte Park and Wildlife Refuge Oversight Committee?
I'm going to do that,
Okay,
just like that.
Second.
second.
Yeah.
Any other comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you for volunteering and helping it make it look nice. We're a few minutes early, but they think we can start, or? Where is Peter?
Peter,
Are you expecting more people?
Well, I thought there would be a couple of folks
We are a few minutes early.
from the committee. Maybe if you want to plan it. What's the time? It's 7:15?
Yeah, we could do a couple other things. Some of these later items,
Certificate of highway.
yeah, is Junior coming in, or?
no, that's just a really basic, there's no change this year in the number of miles of town highway, so it's basically just a document to sign to let V-Trans know there's no change.
Do you think he'll be coming in for early paving like he did last year? We talked
I
about
don't
that.
know. I don't know if he knows yet. He usually waits until see how the winter does on the roads.
So we have that document. There are 2 documents, or?
There's-
Oh, this is the railway. Okay. So what's expected here? A motion to,
Yeah, approve it.
and you say there's no changes?
Right.
So is there a motion to, which one is it? The certificate of highway mileage, it's in our packet. A motion to
Motion
approve?
to approve the certificate of highway mileage for January 2019. Certificate of highway mileage, it says January 2019 on the top.
Looks like there's one signature.
Oh, and authorize, is there one signature for it?
This is from Carrie Alley.
Authorize the,
Authorize the chair to sign.
okay.
I'll second that.
Any other questions with that regard? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do we want to talk about the railroad crossing at Thompson's Point Road for a couple of minutes?
So the state, V-Trans, sent us a letter asking what the width of the right-of-way of Thompson's Point Road, where the railroad crosses, is as far as what the town is willing to defend. And actually, that section is not specifically described in Frank Thornton's road book. There is a section of Thompson's Point Road that is described as a 3-rod road, which is 49.5 feet wide. And that's basically 3 rods is the state default. So if, you know,
is one rod again, 25 feet?
16.5 feet.
16 and a half feet? Oh, we wouldn't want to be anything less than that, would we? 3
Right,
rods.
3 rods is very standard, and that's basically if we had anything larger than that, we would ask for it, but we don't have any.
So what's the difference? I mean, what would make the difference if it was a 4-rod road?
They would potentially need to either keep equipment out of that area or get the select board approval.
Where the bases of the equipment would be mounted.
Right. Yep. And they indicated that this is for a project that will include installing gates at the crossing.
So you say most of East Hampshire Road is 3 rods now, so this is consistent,
Yeah, and Junior thought that was probably.
which is about 50 feet, right, if you do the math?
49 and a half.
Okay. So if we make a motion to approve the 3 rod, we could proceed with this then.
Yep.
I have a question.
Yes,
Steve Roberts called me because he owns property along Thompson's Point Road that they were looking at, and they were looking at all the row of trees that Larry planted on Steve's property, and I was wondering if they were going to be threatened.
I did talk, sorry, go ahead.
No,
I did talk with the folks at the state about that, and they were going to give Steve a call. They said that if the trees are outside of the road right away, they definitely would not be affected. And if they are within the right of way, they would still try to avoid them, but we would be, asking them specifically to make sure they don't harm the trees.
so do we know the size of the right-of-way?
Whether they're in or out. That's actually part of what they're doing right now is to survey that intersection of the road and the railroad to see how, for example, whether the trees are in the right of way or not. So that's something they'll find out as part of this process. Right now, they're just doing the survey.
So what if the trees
Are
are
in the-
in the right-of-way, what would happen?
I don't think it's a given that that would be a problem. Actually, we would probably say the town would ask them not to disturb the trees.
Somebody needs to look into that and make sure that the center line of the road is the center line of the right of way.
Well,
Because I have seen places where the center line of the road, or right of way and the road are the same. And that can make a difference in the answer to this question.
okay.
yeah.
Should we be holding off, or is Junior looking at this yet?
Yes, he felt,
He's okay.
we basically, the options are to assert a specific width or to agree to the assumed
If
statutory.
you put the map up, there's no reason to waver off the center line. It's a very straight area of the road. I can't imagine we'd be not at the center line ought to be true to, I would think.
You see where the trees are?
Yes.
Down here.
Yeah.
But isn't the gate that they're going to put, like on Ferry Road, where would the
It should
gate?
be up by the white mark.
Yeah, by the white marks, that's what I was thinking that was. Just like Ferry Road.
It would be in their rail right away too.
Yeah.
I would expect.
I would expect.
And I can't imagine them, well, I can imagine it, but if there's an alignment issue, having the gate
Yeah,
offset from the road,
I think
you'd
we're
hope
pretty,
that someone would raise the flag and say, oops.
I think we're pretty safe in both directions. Is there a motion to approve this?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve or to confirm the 3-rod width of Thompson's Point Road at the railway crossing.
So we're just going to respond to this, put an X in the mark and return it to them? Okay. Any other comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None?
Did you pass the motion as far as the certificate of highway mileage? Was there a?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Well,
Yep.
I'll go ahead and share it now.
Yes. Want to take on select board updates? Are there any updates at this time?
Well, tomorrow night, the Planning Commission is having a meeting at 5:30 to start discussion about East Charlotte Village planning. And I personally look very forward to having good conversation. And I hope a lot of people show up for whatever. So
5:30 here.
5:30 for about an hour
Okay.
At the town hall.
at the town hall here, yes.
Okay. Any other updates? How are things set up for town meetings? So we're going to follow the school. The school is 5 to 6.
At the informational hearing on Monday, the 4th, they thought, actually, the 5 o'clock is at CVU, and then they'll come to CCS at 6 o'clock, and they thought they wouldn't be more than a half hour, so select board's at 6:30.
So then that means we would be ready to go at 6:30, assuming they're done.
Correct.
Remind me, is that meeting a hearing?
It's a hearing that is only for the Australian ballot articles, which are the 2 bond articles.
So what we do is read and explain what we're doing, and then the public has the option to ask any questions. So the hearing is of the 2 bond issues, which is the library and the ambulance.
Those aren't Australian ballots?
They are. And we're allowed to talk about them during town meeting. Did Margaret or the board say they want to have a talk about the library?
I haven't heard back.
So that's another option. During town meeting, there may be a discussion. The fire and rescue is going to speak, and we've invited the library. Even though it's Australian ballot, on town meeting day, the regulations allow us to talk about it. And so if they'd like to, they can.
I did put a little bit of time on the next 2 agendas to talk about the presentation, if you want to take time to do that.
Yeah.
Because our history is that we've never allowed ourselves to talk about Australian ballot items at the meeting. It's kind of what in people's hearts and minds. And I would think that we should do some good outreach on that, like cite the new statute, cite the chapter and verse, so there's not a feeling of discomfort or awkwardness at that point in time when we want to get business done.
That's a good idea. We could put something in Charlotte News, and we can put something in Front Porch Forum, Citizen.
And the other thing that people don't always know is if you have the same, someone's running for office and you have the same term, same office that they're running for, the first, you can't sign both of them you have to sign just once. Otherwise, the first one counts and the second one doesn't, so.
So that sound good to you, Dean? Yep. Okay, that's good. Thank you for that. Any other comments regarding our updates? Okay, we're pretty much on time. Emily, if I'm not mistaken, right? Does Peter want to kick this off on what we're doing tonight, or?
I could just take a minute
Sure.
just to- before Emily gets into presentation, just how we got to this point. Everybody remembers that, of course, last year the town plan was approved, and concurrent with that, we started to work on amending the town plan. Actually, we started working on it before it went to the town vote. But we started working on an amendment to, so that we could include the requirements for action study 4. And that was with the help of Daryl, the town planner, and Emily from regional, the energy committee. We spent a lot of time over about 8 months updating it to get it ready. Ideally, our plan was to have it ready for town vote this coming March. what this requirement is for Act 174 is the new municipal and regional energy planning standards, which if met, affords municipalities substantial investments when deciding alternative energy systems in the town. It is voluntary, but simply put, it gives us a greater weight in terms of anybody who wants to cite alternative energy in the town. The Planning Commission completed this in the fall, late fall of last year. We sent it on to regions to have them look at it, and they said that it meets the requirements to comply with Act 174. So shortly thereafter, we, the Planning Commission, voted on it. We had a town hearing, and after that, we voted to forward it to the select board. So that's where we're going to look at it.
So it's in our hands.
Yeah.
We're not going to be able to, we're going to listen tonight, the background only from regional planning is going to speak to us, the history, some of the background. We need to have 2 hearings, of which this is not one of them, right?
Right.
And they have to be spaced, I think it's 15 days. So it's a process we're going to go through and then be ready for the next town meeting, whether it's if there's a reason for a special meeting, or do you think we want to call a meeting in November or something to prove this, or?
It's possible. I mean, we knew that it was really tough for the town meeting, right? But we were thinking that we might be able to make it for the budget vote, which is in April. It's like 3 weeks later, right? If we can't make that, I think we should consider possibly having a special vote, perhaps. And the reason I say that is if the select board agrees to move forward with it, I think just to keep the momentum going. Because I think if we let it sit, then we're going to have to kind of start over again next year.
Okay, so we're in a listening mode tonight, and then hearings will be scheduled in accordance with the requirements here over the next. So when do you have the first hearing tentatively scheduled?
It's not scheduled yet.
Okay. And does it have to be public hearings, 15 days? Oh, it's got to be put in the papers, notify the public, so it's probably going to be a month or so away, the earliest. Okay. So Emily, you're from Regional Planning, and you've helped guide us. There was a working session Friday, maybe, of this past week, Thursday or Friday. Peter was here, I was here, Dean, kind of went through things and kind of asked you to give us all an overview of what Act 174, what it represents, and then maybe talk about how we're changing our plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. As introduced, my name's Emily Noslier. I'm a senior planner at Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, and I've been working pretty closely with the town probably for the last year, as we've described, on this plan of creating an enhanced energy plan for Charlotte. And this plan is a series of proposed amendments to your plan that was adopted in 2018. So it's not a separate document, but rather a series of enhancements, if you will, and additional policies, strategies, and data pieces to the plan that's already existing. So my involvement with this through CCRPC comes from the fact that the Vermont Department of Public Service has given us a series of funding allocations to help municipalities write these enhanced energy plans. And the plan that the Planning Commission has sent to you meets these standards, not only from my perspective as someone who did a lot of drafting, but also from the perspective of other colleagues at CCRPC who weren't involved. So we do get sort of a check on ourselves in that way. And in exchange for meeting these standards from the Department of Public Service for enhanced energy planning, municipalities do receive what's called substantial deference on their plan policies during the Public Utilities Commission process. And I'll go more into that in detail later, but the important thing to know about it is that what your plan's policies get before the Public Utilities Commission now, when they're reviewing, a solar farm or a wind tower, is called due consideration. Substantial deference is a higher level of consideration than that. And that is one of the advantages of having such a plan. And please, stop me at any time if there's questions or anything that I can clarify for all of you.
So the plan is in effect when? The Act 174?
Act 174 was passed in 2016.
Okay.
We, at the regional level, also have an enhanced energy plan that meets these standards, so our own plan also has substantial deference before the PUC. We got that determination in August of 2018. We've just had Richmond, the town of Richmond, get this determination at the local level. That's the first of our municipalities in Chittenden County that's received it. So the Select Board has in their packets tonight a list of the energy planning standards from the Department of Public Service. It looks like this. It's quite a long checklist, and it goes through the different parts of the plan that meet each of the standards that DPS has set. But to summarize them, the plan has to have a discussion of current energy use in Charlotte. It has to talk about ways that energy use and energy sources need to change to meet Vermont's 90% renewable by 2050 goals, and also other statutory goals that are in effect in Vermont. It has to have actions that talk about how those changes could happen in each municipality. It also has to have renewable energy generation goals. So this is sort of the trade-off. You can have substantial deference to have more of a say over where renewable energy generation goes, but you also have to set specific goals for generation in your municipality. And corresponding to that, there also needs to be policies about where things should or should not be sited, and maps showing those things visually. There is quite a bit of data that's included in the plan. It's in Chapter 2, I believe, of the plan, and it comes from something called the Long Range Energy Alternatives Planning Model, or the LEAP model. I had not planned to go into this in too much detail in the presentation, but I'm happy to talk about it as much as you want if you have questions afterwards. It's something that we use to look at where Chittenden County and all of our municipalities are right now, and then to look at a series of changes that would lead us to meet the 2050 goals. So those goals are 90% renewable sources across all types of energy use. And then there's also other statutory goals about weatherization and a reduction in per capita energy use. So the important thing to know about the LEAP model and the data that are in the town plan is that it doesn't look at behavior that's happening now in Chittenden County or in Charlotte and project it forward if that behavior continues as it is. It sets this 2050 goal, and then it looks at the most reasonable way based on a series of assumptions to get there. And it includes, from our regional planning work, transportation scenarios that we've chosen to plan for, and also population growth that we think is reasonable for each town. So some of the examples for in Charlotte, the LEAP scenario sets, because the 90% renewable by 2050 goal is extremely ambitious, these goals are also extremely ambitious for the town. So switching 89% of light duty vehicles to electric vehicles is a really ambitious goal. I think it's less than 1% of vehicles in Charlotte right now are light duty electric vehicles. And then also increasing public transit and carpooling opportunities for people who live in Charlotte. Getting 33% of businesses and 60% of homes to use heat pumps. So that's moving people off of fuel oil or kerosene that they're using now. There's also a pretty significant chunk of homes that are on wood heating now and would stay on wood heating, but potentially moving to a more efficient kind of stove. Also, as I mentioned before, a 47% reduction in total energy use per capita, not necessarily because of huge behavior changes, but because these new technologies that the LEAP model is assuming people will switch to are much more efficient than a gasoline car or a fuel oil furnace, for example. As I mentioned, there's also energy generation goals. There, as of July 2017, which is the data that were current when this planning process was started, there were a little bit over 5,000 megawatt hours being generated annually in Charlotte. Almost all of those are coming from solar panels. And what we've set as targets at the regional level is that Charlotte would need an additional 7,548 on the low end megawatt hours, up to 16,031 megawatt hours of extra annual generation by 2050. And I'm happy to talk more about how we came up with these targets. We have targets set for ourselves in the regional plan for the entire region, and then they're also broken down to each municipality. And then in terms of the energy generation goals, not only does there need to be information on how much generation needs to happen, but also where both potentially you can define places that you would like it, and one of the benefits, again, of substantial deference is you can define where you don't want it. So this graphic is something that we've produced for all of the municipalities that we work with. It shows proportionally the total land area that you have, a little bit over 26,000 acres. This orange circle, which is quite small, is the area that we're assuming is probably pretty good for solar installation. And there's a series of assumptions that we make for that. But that does exclude areas that are constrained areas, so that are wetlands or that are mapped prime agricultural soils, for example. So this is really showing just the most prime potential solar areas. And then these two much smaller circles are the amount that you would need to develop in solar installations based on the average capacity that you would get out of a certain acreage and to meet the low and the high goal. And you can see that it's really quite a bit smaller than Charlotte as a whole. And I hope that, I think that for a lot of people, this can be potentially a little bit useful of a graphic to show that it's not the entire town that we're discussing here. Yeah.
So 191 acres, 104 acres, that's like 0.001%. Is that those acres, if they had solar generation, would meet the goal? Or are you saying because of other issues within the town, those are the only ones available?
That's a great question. So for the orange circle here, this 191 acres, that's showing the area that we think has absolutely no constraints on it. So there is quite a bit that's not shown in this 191 acres that probably does have solar potential, but might need to be screened in some way or have, potentially some agricultural soil mitigation, for example. So this is showing in the orange circle just the very best of area, but it's not showing all of the area that there is potential of. And then the 48 acres and the 104 acres are showing just what would be enough to meet the target if it were developed.
Now, does this include the rooftops?
So that's a really good question. And the answer is a little complicated. The way that our model works is it does not exclude impervious surfaces. So we do have estimates of how much could be produced with the rooftops that are in Charlotte by assuming, a certain average of houses or businesses that would be able to hold solar arrays. We don't, because houses aren't taken out of our solar model, it's not really appropriate to add rooftop generation to this because that would be double counting certain areas that both have a house on them and otherwise would be good for solar, if that makes sense. But there is, I think, in the plan there is a description of how much could be done with solar on rooftops. Excuse me.
Could you explain the relationship between the low goal, the high goal, and the one state goal for 90% by 2050?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So Vermont's goal to meet 90% of its energy by 2050 is across all sectors. So it's not just electricity, but it is to meet 90% of electricity needs. with renewable sources by 2050. And the guidance that we got from the state's comprehensive energy plan is that they're anticipating that by 2050, 50% of Vermont's electric needs will need to be generated in-state, 50% of them will be coming from out of state. It's not specifically defined whether it's Hydro-Quebec or from other contracts. So already we're starting at 50% of the state goal. And we set our regional goal. We got sort of varying guidance from the state on multiple different ways that regions, as all regions worked on these regional energy plans, we got varying guidance from the state about ways to break down the state goal to our region. So we weren't given a specific goal from the state of Vermont. We ended up doing a range because we wanted a low goal that reflected both the relatively small land area that we proportionally have compared to the rest of the state of Vermont, and then also a high goal that represents proportionally the much higher population that we have. So the low goal is, I don't remember the exact number, but I'm happy to get it for you if you want. It's about 6%, I think, of the state of Vermont's overall goal, but again, with 50% taken off the top already. And then the high goal is an average of that 6 or so percent and the about 25 to 30% of the state's population that we have. So that's where the range comes from. Great. So going back to this idea of where you want to see renewable energy generation in your town, the town plan, the draft that you have before you, defines and maps constraints, and this is terminology that we both use in our regional plan and that we've gotten from the state. So these are areas where development of any kind, but including renewable energy generation, either might be inappropriate, and we call these possible constraints, if there's a possibility that it's inappropriate, but a possibility that it could be mitigated, and then areas where development is completely inappropriate or prohibited in your local policies, your land use regulations, so on. And we call these known constraints. So some of these came to us at the regional level and to you all through this Act 174 process, sort of predefined by the state of Vermont. And so, for example, the Department of Environmental Conservation came to this process saying that river corridors, for example, are always going to be inappropriate for development, and they will always be participating before the Public Utilities Commission saying that those are not appropriate for development. So that can't be changed in your local plan to make those less restrictive. But there is an opportunity to have local constraints. So areas that you all are regulating or that you have policies about that the state of Vermont does not. And you can include those in your plan. The draft plan has a list of constraints that are drawn from your existing plans and your zoning area of high public value. And so those are a full list, as you know, I think probably about 20 resources that are really specifically talked about and defined. And in working with the Energy Committee and the Planning Commission, we were able to sort of divide those into areas where there are known constraints where really no kind of development is ever appropriate, and areas that are possible constraints where you would expect to see a little bit more flexibility and some opportunities for mitigation rather than outright prohibition. And to just put in a clarifying point about the constraints, especially known constraints, the guidance that we got through Act 174 from the state is that for local constraints to essentially hold up before the Public Utilities Commission or hold up in the appeals process, they have to be equally restrictive of all development. So as I mentioned, some areas of high public value are areas where some development is allowable. So agricultural soils, I think, comes to mind as areas where some kind of development in your town is allowable with mitigation and with proper siting. And so as I said, for example, those would be a possible constraint in this because to prohibit all solar development on these areas would not be considered equally restrictive of all development. And so, as I said, having having this certification or a determination of energy compliance does give what's called in statute land conservation measures and specific policies. So these constraint policies that are in your plans, it gives them substantial deference before the Public Utilities Commission. And the definition of that in statute is that unless there is a clear and convincing reason otherwise, they have to be applied what's called in accordance with their terms. So whereas due consideration did not have that very specific call to the Public Utilities Commission, this is really a step up from there for policies. And we are hopeful. We have had some cases at the regional level where we've had known constraints in our town plan, and that we have seen some reconfiguring of projects to avoid impacts to them. So we don't, because this is such a new process, we don't have a huge amount of case law about it right now, but this is, something that we're hoping will really be useful for our municipalities going forward. And then I'm happy to answer, it's the last one, I guess, any comments or questions, or to talk about anything specific in the plan.
This seems like it's a solar plan and not anything else, maybe a little more. So is it safe to assume that 174 is hanging stacked on solar panels?
Right.
This appears to be a plan mostly for solar panels and maybe a little wind, but other than that, it's no other kind of energy generation. It seems like all of the effort is in, most of it's in siting solar panels.
I think that's the case. I think certainly we've had this discussion, which is it's a long period of time, 2050, and then it could be something else in 10 years, 15 years, it could be some other system that isn't solar.
And if you don't mind me adding, I would also say that I think that the Charlotte plan is very solar focused, but the intention of Act 174, there are other municipalities, especially our more mountainous communities, where their focus really is on the siting and constraints on wind turbines. So I think it does vary municipality to municipality.
Both have the inherent problem of not being reliable. When it gets dark.
So, Peter, where should we go from here? Should we, because we set up some time, we have more time now. One suggestion, if you're going to suggest we go through the plan, as all of us, we need a definition of single underline, double underline, light gray, all that stuff. Is that where you suggest we go now?
Well, I'm not sure, actually. I mean, that's one option. You wouldn't get through it. I mean, you would allocate it in an hour. So
Right.
I've got 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes.
Right.
Maybe it makes more sense to say that for the hearing, so that we're kind of not repeating ourselves constantly. Assuming that the select board agrees to move forward to that hearing.
I would at least like a clue as to what the legend for the report as to whether, I mean, double underlines, struck out different color.
It isn't clear.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to follow.
Yeah. So anything that you see that is double underlined, for example, if you look on page 25, there's a number of bullet points that are double underlined. That means that is not new material, but it was moved from someplace else in the plan. So concurrent with that, you'll see other areas where there's a double strike through, which makes the reciprocal of that. So it's things that were more appropriate to be in a different part of the energy section. So it's not new material, it's just been relocated within the town plan.
So double strike through does not ever mean it's been deleted, it just means it's been moved.
Correct, check, correct.
Double strike through with an underline.
Double strike through,
Is
and
moved.
then reciprocal, that would be moved, and then you would see it in a new location where it's double underlined. Correct.
Single strike through means deleted.
Yep, and then if it's a single, that's new edits.
Single
New
underline.
text, so, anywhere it's single underline.
I thought one in particular area that could use some explanation is this map that's up on the screen, which is existing renewable energy generation and preferred sites. Some of it is sort of, I think, terminology that the state has, or perhaps regional planning. I don't know whether either planning commission or you would want to explain that?
Is that in here?
It's
The maps are not included, right?
in the hard copy. Maybe I didn't include those. I thought they were separate, but maybe not.
Usually color maps. We looked at this before.
Yeah. Were they not in the packet?
I think so.
Does the planning commission want to explain this map, or should we have that?
Which map is that?
The existing renewable and preferred sites. So it has, the yellow is existing, mostly solar sites, and there are a couple of windmills, I think, shown, and actually a couple of dams. Maybe the dams aren't hydro.
This is the one where you read for preferred, right? I'm looking at that.
Yellow,
I'm trying to see.
sorry, yeah.
Yeah, the yellow are existing sites, and then the areas that are indicated right now as preferred are gravel, mostly out-of-use gravel pits or sand pits.
And that's from the state.
It
But
is.
that's not to say that as a town, we might locate other areas that we think are good locations. So I think these maps are works in progress in that respect.
Oh, can I comment? Emily, on the slideshow you said, I read the nomenclature you used, but maybe the map should say, it should match the nomenclature in your presentation, like current sites, but most suitable or whatever the language is that we have should be in that legend there.
Yeah, I think that is something that, so there are also maps that show the potential for solar energy, for example. And so I think this is probably where you would see those, both the prime solar areas with this dark red, and the base solar, what we call the base solar areas, which are, areas where there's potential but possibly some problems in the red. On the preferred sites map, preferred sites are a term that come from the Vermont net metering rules, and if you are located on a preferred site, of which there are a number of categories, you have some additional benefits under the net metering rules. You can have a larger site. The net metering rates for power buyback are a little bit better for you. And so, there are, as mentioned, there are some sand and gravel pits and some closed landfills in town that might qualify for this. One of the things that Dean and I had discussed was, potentially putting a just a little bit of a disclaimer on this to say that you can't guarantee that these former gravel pits are still in a condition that would make them a preferred site, because we don't know really how accurate this data layer is. On the other hand, you could add additional sites in the future if there were places that the town, town-owned property that you felt very strongly about. You could make it a preferred site as part of your town plan, or through a later process, through a joint letter process with your planning commission and your select board as well. So does that help?
Are these sites, gravel pits, that kind of thing, are they
privately owned or town-owned as an example?
The landfill is town-owned, that's the one up on Plouffe Lane. The other gravel pits are privately owned unless it's on the same parcel, but I mean, it looks like there was a couple in the vicinity of, up here. So that's the landfill, and then there's a couple of gravel pits that
So
might.
that's a let's say take Plouffe landfill, that's a preferable site?
In terms of the definition of,
It probably is in terms of, yes, in terms of the definition. There are occasional, depending on when the landfill started and ended, there is sometimes some difficulty in pulling up the correct paperwork to essentially to prove that it was closed down in the right way. We've seen that in some municipalities, but probably.
So this means that if someone wanted to develop a net generating site, they could come to the town and say, I want to put X panels, Plouffe Lane, old dump, and then we would go through a process and perhaps allow it with whatever conditions and expenses. So that's what in private, that just comes through the review board as well here, I would assume.
I think the process might be slightly different.
Okay.
In a situation like that, there would be, in both cases, whether it was owned by the municipality or whether it was privately owned, being a preferred site, if it was determined to be a preferred site, would, give them at the end of the process, some benefits in terms of a bigger facility or better net metering rates. They still, either way, would have to go through the process of making sure that it followed the land use policies, both that the state is set for this process and that the municipality is set. In the case of a private developer, for example, they would still have to go through the process you set around, this is quite close to a river, so your river corridor regulations or wetland buffer regulations or whatever resources would be there. So it doesn't allow people to skip that step. It just, once all of those other criteria are met, it just adds additional benefits at the end.
So putting this energy regulation in our town plan then defines a criteria if a developer wants to come forward rather than winging it, we would have a plan based on the new act.
Right, it would add an additional set of criteria for review. And I didn't mean to talk over you, Peter, if you were going to say something.
No, that's exactly right, that we would have a vector-based criteria that really works both ways in terms of where the town can appropriate it, where it might not. Where it would not have it, we weren't compliant.
were additional sites considered as far as preferred sites, or additional layers, or was there, I guess, right now the preferred sites are basically the default gravel pits and landfill?
That's correct.
No further investigation.
You were talking about net metering rates and benefits. Does 174 fix net metering rates?
It does not.
So
It's a completely separate process.
I've had a 24 kW system when I'm a net producer for 10 years. And Green Mountain Power's arbitrarily decided not to pay for the excess power anymore. That seems to be a big consideration in anybody's planning, and the town's planning of allowing for meeting this goal if the power company can just say, well, we changed our mind, sorry, we don't want to pay for your electricity anymore.
Good point.
I certainly don't disagree with you. It's not,
So
I can't say that it was something that was addressed in Act 174.
So 174 is kind of blank on whether this is all going to get paid for in the future or not.
Separate process. What is regulating that metering right now?
Net metering is regulated under the Vermont net metering rules, which go through an update every 2 or 3 years. I'm sorry, I don't remember which one. it is. So the latest ones, I think, came into effect in July of 2018.
And that is regulated by what body?
That's regulated by the Public Utilities Commission.
Can we make sure that we get the maps, so when we're looking at this, we have the information?
Yeah.
So how would the energy get, for example, the Plouffe Lane? How would it get to the main road? How is it wired, or how's that work? Just for example, do you
I'm not sure
put
this is the
over-
answer, but there isn't actually an installation on private property in that vicinity, so I guess there's some ability to do it, and I'm not exactly sure how. I don't think it's three-phase power.
Over or under? Must go under.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So
Sorry, it
Yes,
depends on the
please.
scale of the development, in terms of what the wiring will be. But just like you get any electricity, it will be similar to that, it's similar wiring. But it will be up to the individual private developer to propose that. But my other comment, I just wanted to comment to Fritz, by the way, Susie Hodgson. GMP does guarantee a rate for 10 years. And Act 174 is really for the purposes of planning. And what GMP does is for incentives, so it's a kind of separate process. But in your case, it was 5 years. Then that is not right.
Yeah, but
I would
your
take that
choice-
up. We have a local resident who works for Green Mountain Power. I would take it up with him. 'Cause
I've
that's
kinda-
what I've been told. They do guaranteed for 10
I've
years, which is
taken it
usually
up-
the financial horizon for planning
I've
these.
taken it up and discussed it with them directly,
Right.
and it got to
That's-
the point where they said sue us.
Wow, okay.
So,
I'm going to follow up and ask that question then, because that's not what what
because
I've been
frankly,
told.
in my case, what they did violates some federal statutes, but they said, well, we don't have to use those because
Okay.
Vermont made these new rules.
Yeah, that's a key issue. That's really outside of this planning consideration, but Fritz, I'll follow up with that, because that's an important, really important consideration.
So Peter, as we got into the maps, you were suggesting how best to spend our time, rather than going through line by line, or are there other things we could accomplish now, or just set a date for the first hearing, or?
Yeah, I would suggest setting a date for the first hearing.
Do we want this to be like we've done on ordinances and stuff, set aside an hour, like from 6 to 7, and have 1 hour, but you're not gonna get through the whole, we spent 2 or 3 hours, and we just barely got through it. So, do we want to have a standalone meeting some afternoon, or an off Monday night, or what are your thoughts?
I think standalone might be a good plan. I know that, Dean, you had looked at the calendar, right? I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was feasible to have it ready for the April vote, but it was really tight. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was tight. And I guess it's also a question that the draft warning for the April vote is included in the town plan. That we're talking about the budget, the charter budget vote in April, and that draft warning just includes the budget article, so it doesn't include anything else in that.
But that's not the way the charter was intended, to add something on in April, in my opinion.
Well, the intent was to, the charter says money articles that were hand voted at town meeting would get confirmed at the special meeting. But it is a warned meeting. You can have a warned meeting anytime we go through the process for a warned meeting. So that is a scheduled warned meeting. If we met the criteria, nothing to do with the charter. If the first Tuesday in April is when we're having that meeting, if we wanted to bring something else up, it would just be a separate warning, I would imagine. I don't know if it's probably pushing things, but.
We need to figure out the time frame for the meetings and the time frame it takes for the warning.
Right.
Yeah, I think
It's probably pushing it too much.
Yeah, for the hearings, I think it's possible, except one hearing I think would not be on a Monday night. your normal meeting night. I think the second hearing would be on perhaps a Thursday. And if that's,
Is it 15 days in between the two?
15 days, no later, no further apart than 15 days before the vote.
No, I'm talking about between hearings.
Oh,
I forgot.
yeah,
you've got to put
the
it in paper.
warning is supposed to be 15 days, and then the, to get into the paper requires a couple days. You get it to them on a Friday for the following Thursday.
Peter, was this editing done by the Planning Commission, Energy Committee, and open meetings, mostly?
Yes.
Were there any public concerns that kind of came to light during that process?
In the hearing that we had, I think there was 2 people there.
Emily helped you too, right? Or was that
Oh, yeah,
off?
absolutely. Emily and
Darryl.
Darryl from the Energy Committee.
Energy.
Can I comment? I mean, it took us a while to kind of get into gear on this because it's so complicated. And I've got to say that Emily and the Energy Committee, Emily in particular, who understands the law, and from the regional planning perspective, it was super helpful to me because, I was getting maybe ahead of myself a little bit in what we thought we could put in there. And then we got kind of like, get a little reality check here. Let's make sure we do the minimum required to have this substantial deference. And so we kind of came back a little bit and even said to the Energy Committee, we want to be conservative here. And we were. This is a conservative, what we must do to get this approval. So in this document that Emily kind of put up on the slides is the most important document from my perspective because it's our checklist and it's a beautiful tool that we have to actually know that we didn't miss something or that we got, conversely, we got everything. So, this is really the tool to look at versus, in my opinion, versus going line by line. If you checked yes on it, it says where in the plan it is. So it really has everything in it. And I just think this is really what I would be looking at.
Over the weekend.
Yeah, to make sure that, are we getting ahead of ourselves? So that's one piece. The other one was, since we started working on this for whatever, a year or so, the negative comments that I heard from the audience was, how are you going to regulate this? And Lane, you even said the word regulation a minute ago, and I'm like, okay, maybe we need a little more clarification as to, is this a plan or is this regulatory? Are we going to tell people they have to cut their energy in half or go get an electric car? No. And that was some of the biggest concerns from the audience was, what does this all mean to us? And so I feel like that's what we want to have maybe some clarification from Emily on tonight is what does this mean in terms of our regulatory obligations or not?
Yeah, you want to comment? I mean, it's a goal.
Sure.
Versus regulation. Yeah, good question. Thank you.
Yeah, that is a good question. Thank you. From our perspective at the Regional Planning Commission, I would say that sort of our philosophy on planning in general is that when it comes to the actions that you're laying out in your plan, we are never really specifically monitoring those to see if they've happened. And, the land use policies that you're setting in terms of, things shall or shall not be allowed to happen. Here, those are obviously a completely different story, but the energy planning, similar, I think, to a lot of other kinds of planning that happens in our municipalities at our regional level, sets these aspirational goals and, does everything that we can within our power to work towards them. And this is our stance with our own energy plan as well. Knowing that there are places where our power to make change is very limited and we're really relying on, education and incentives and those incentivizing our residents to do the things that
Exactly.
we're hoping they'll do.
And this
So.
is really important to convey way up in front, that these are aspirational, and furthermore, RBC is going to do the data collection, and reporting is not going to be a municipal charge in terms of our own staff. So that's what made me feel better about the whole thing.
So back to the timing, it sounds like it'd be a little bit rushed if we really try to get this from April, and we are changing the purpose of that April meeting, but, I mean, is the sense of the board to take more time and you go call a special meeting in July, August, that kind of thing?
How much does a special meeting cost?
It's not that bad, it's like $500 or something, I think Mary said.
800 was coming to mind.
Not that expensive. Are you, Peter, feeling that we're this far along, just keep it going, or?
Well, I think keeping it going makes sense, and when I'm playing Marty, I think it's a great idea, instead of one line for night, is to use that checklist. It is very comprehensive, it shows exactly what's required and where that correlates to the town plan. So I would say, let's have the hearing, let's go through the checklist and see where we end up.
This is all proposing for energy. Is there anything that changed in here that doesn't have to do with the energy sector?
There were some changes that were made outside of that. I think there were very many, there were a few.
Yeah, I think they were pretty minor. I did notice, I mean, there were some in transportation section which were energy related, and then there were one or two that were outside. I think, and also in chapter 3, which I showed yesterday, there was the change in terms of fleshing out a little bit more information on the history, but it was really history, not policy or strategy.
So, is there a date you had? I'm not sure you said this before.
I don't have that date quite on the tip of my tongue right now. I'd have to look back
But
at
you have to think about the newspapers,
Right.
our papers every 2 weeks,
Right.
citizens every week. I mean, it's all got to be warned.
You could have the first hearing and then decide whether you want to.
That's what Peter's saying.
Right.
So what's the soonest, knowing we have to have a warning for the hearing?
I'd want to make sure, I'd want to look at the calendar before. I
But
give you-
like third week in February or something like that on the
Probably
census.
is, yep. I think it is around there.
And do an off Monday night, or is that what you're thinking? Or we're thinking?
I think that could be correct.
So that's the first public hearing?
Yeah, so it has to be advertised.
Yeah, there is, that off Monday is Patriots Day, or President's Day rather, which technically is a holiday.
So what day is that?
That's the 18th.
18th?
The 18th?
Do we want to shoot for that? Anybody not available?
Yeah, we just
I'm not
have
going
to
to be here, but that shouldn't be.
Who's going to lead us through? Will you still be with us, Emily, or are we with our own planning commission?
I think that's up to you. I'm happy to be here if it's useful, but,
That would be
all right, I will be here. Okay. Should I check my calendar?
So what we're saying is we go through the basic requirements, as you said, and then see where it falls within our update to the plan. So we're going to set as a target to have a hearing on the 18th, and then we'll assess if we've gotten far enough along to have a second hearing.
Why wouldn't you want a second hearing anyway?
Why would we?
Why wouldn't you?
Oh, no, we wouldn't.
Well, someone said someone said, see how it goes, so.
Well, we have to be 2 weeks after that, but Dean was saying.
At least 2 weeks. And 2 weeks is 14 days, and the morning is 15 days.
Tentatively schedule one for March 4th.
It would be,
So when is the April meeting? What's that date? The special,
9th?
that's the 9th?
right.
So the point that Carrie and I have been talking about, do we need to have an attorney's interpretation? Can we have another warning for that date that has the town plan?
I think that is an attorney's interpretation.
It is that we can or cannot?
No, it would require.
We would inquire his interpretation, because it is for the charter, but if we need to do some other business, I would
I
think.
mean, I think technically, as you said, you could warn a hearing regardless of what else is being
But
voted
in
on.
time, to advertise, because it takes, this is an Australian ballot vote, right? So you have to have at least 30 days in advance, so you can get absentee ballots and ballots prepared and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So that means we'd have to be all done toward the end of March.
Prior to March, no.
I mean, excuse me, yeah,
Be ready by March.
early March.
It's not gonna happen.
So if you have one on the 18th, yeah, then you have to have it on the 4th,
March 4th.
which is day before town meeting, right? It's too much. I don't think we can do it.
Or the 6th, March 6th.
What is March 6th?
It's a Wednesday.
Too late?
It's but then you'd have to have the warning available like on the 8th probably,
Warning March 8th.
which is a Friday.
Yeah, but it's gotta be in the paper by then. And it takes.
It's gotta be in the paper?
It takes us 2 weeks.
I don't think it can be done.
3 weeks to get in the paper. If it's approved on the 7th, it takes, to put it in the paper, it's gonna take 2 to 3 weeks. Unless
The
you
issue
know.
with having a special election, I mean, I think
At some later time.
when it's done, and
I think that's more practical. So we've said what date in February, the what, 18th?
Well, you did say the 18th, but actually that doesn't work because the warning, the first paper we would get it in, the Citizen, would be coming out on the 7th, which is next, it's not this Thursday, but
Okay.
it's the following Thursday. So that would have to be out for 15 days.
Maybe the 25th.
Yeah, the 25th would be possible.
Which is our next regular meeting.
That's a regular meeting though,
So start at 6 o'clock?
but it sounds like it's going to take more than an hour to go through this, I believe. You can make it 2 hours, 6 to 8, and then do other select board stuff. So, 25th of February, are you back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And again, if I can just say, I think it really would make sense to keep going and get through it, have the 2 hearings. If it's too tight, it's too tight, as opposed to having one hearing and then putting it off, waiting. You know, it's fresh in everybody's mind. I think it's really, would be advantageous that we get all the way through the hearings and go from there.
So should we set the second hearing?
The second hearing could be March 25th.
There's no statute of limitations on the second hearing.
There is.
To a special meeting.
Not to a special meeting, but it would have to be adopted within a month.
That's fine.
Emily, I see in this report here, does the plan promote decreased use of fossil fuels for heating? But then actions and policies could promote switching to wood. Do we have enough forest in Vermont to take care of a lot of wood burning, or I don't know what we as Vermonters will want to cut all that wood, a lot of wood
Yeah, that's a really
for
good
people to
question.
do.
I think there is an assumption that a lot of wood, sorry, do I need to talk into a microphone? This is not. That's a really good question, and I think there is an assumption that a lot of wood production is going to come from out of state. So, for example, while our regional plan and I think your local plan is really supportive of local forestry, it does also take into account that you're right, there just isn't, in a lot of cases, especially in a place like Charlotte that's quite agricultural, there isn't a lot of, there isn't really enough wood within the municipal boundaries to take care of it. And I think that the McNeil plant in Burlington is a really good example of this. Most of the wood that they're burning for electric power there is being sourced from upstate New York, for example. So it's not an assumption that it is going to come from within Vermont.
And is that using a lot of fossil fuels to get here?
It mostly comes in on
How
rail.
does it come on rail?
I think.
Okay.
So that probably is diesel powered.
Okay. And then I did, oh, go ahead.
I think we're just setting dates, and we can discuss this during the hearings.
Yeah, that's fine.
So what did you say for the date? The first one is when? February 20th?
February 25th.
Did you also say then March 25th for the
Yes.
second one?
Yep.
25th. So we'll just plan that.
What time are these gonna start?
The one on February 25th would probably be 6 o'clock.
Hey, to make it for an hour and a half.
So the people
Yeah, I think
might
so,
have, already have a different meeting at 5:30 to 7?
I guess we won't be there. Is it in the same place?
That's right here.
It is. I would have to say it's more important. What is the circumstance?
In which meeting is that?
Wastewater.
Okay, any other comments we want to make on this?
Emily, does the concept work for you?
I do have, I will have to reschedule another meeting, but it sounds like this is the only time that you all meet, so I can make it happen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments about scheduling and our objectives? Yeah, go ahead.
Peter Carrero, this was great, I actually sat down and read it, and I have a couple questions I'm gonna ask you later, maybe I do. This is for Emily. Emily, you said that I think 1% of vehicles that show up right now are electric powered. And I'm just thinking ahead, you said it's gonna go up to 49% or 46%? That's the goal?
The goal is actually 89% by 2050.
Wow, so, I mean, I own trucks and I love the idea of electric vehicles. But my question is, as we move that way, the gasoline tax supports our roads and bridges. When you, and this is a naive, when you plug in your vehicle to charge it, does some of that go towards the highway funds now, or?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And they're actually, I'm happy to talk more with you about this.
Okay.
Outside of this, there actually is an investigation before the Public Utilities Commission right now about this, and there's, the legislature has tasked them to investigate, a number of different issues about electric vehicle adoption. That's one of them, and determining how moving forward is the appropriate way to make sure that, there's not revenue being lost.
So right now, all the electric vehicles that are charging aren't contributing to the roads and bridges? Like when a diesel truck pulls into a gas station and gets,
Right,
300
yeah,
gallons
they're
worth of
not-
gas, they're paying $125 worth in taxes.
Right.
So when those big rigs become electric, they're not paying the road tax anymore?
So one of the things that the Public Utilities Commission is investigating right now is whether it would be appropriate to have either a surcharge at charging stations that would serve a similar
Okay.
function to that, or to have an additional either an annual registration fee or potentially a one-time registration fee
All right.
that would serve a similar thing. So they haven't decided which one, but they are investigating
Okay, thank
that
you.
issue right now.
You have the same problem with the electrical grid too, because most of the grid is maintained by the companies that don't, like, when you have your own little solar project, you don't pay into the maintenance of the grid. So there's a similar issue that I don't know if the state has addressed yet either on who maintains the grid.
It's the pool, right? The pool of money that's going into that, right?
Yeah, it's the people, the fossil fuel energy companies own the grid and maintain it by when they sell their fossil fuel. So when you get rid of all that fossil fuel, the cost of solar, it's gonna go up because someone has to fix it.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for coming here. Thanks for coming on this topic. We're going to talk about the West Burial Ground. I think the Cemetery Commission's here.
Last few months are gonna be your best.
Last few months? I'm in my last month, believe it or not. So who do we want here? This is gonna be the cemetery? I gotta see who all these people are. I gotta look at my book. Did you hear that Robert put in his? There we go. Oh, Susan, Vicky, and Chris?
Did Charlie put his petition in for auditor?
Yes.
See?
Okay. We'll come back to order. The 8:15 item topic is request for bids to replace westerly boundary fence at West Burying Grounds, Barber Hill Cemetery. So anyone want to get us started on this topic?
Sure. Speaking of Mr. here from the Cemetery Commission, I just want to emphasize that this is just for the westerly side of the fence, and in terms of the budget, they had a previous estimate, I believe, for $14,000. And the plan is to go out to bid, so, that was an estimate, and we'll see what the actual bids are. There's money in their operating budget. Some will go towards mowing, but including what's in the checking account, it comes up to more than the $14,000. So it appears that there's enough to do the project, but we have to see what the bids come in at.
So what's our role right now?
To approve the request for bids, which I can't
Okay.
seem to get up on the screen.
Do you want to give us an explanation? You have in the past a couple times, and just update where we're at and where the money.
It's changed except that we're requesting it go to bid and actually find out exactly how much it's going to cost.
Why don't you describe the fence? Well, Robert was here last meeting, you guys weren't, and he had a whole bunch of questions, so maybe describe the fence and what the plan is.
We don't have,
Got some good pictures.
there were pictures at one time, but that was.
I might be able to get it from the previous
Yeah.
packet. What, do you remember what day it was? December 17th?
Maybe.
Is it raw, what do you call it?
So, no, it's cast aluminum, and we're looking at black. There's a few different styles within that range, but we're talking about 4 feet high. Let's see.
Oh, it's on the sheet.
Yeah,
That's,
is it on Spear Street in South Burlington? On the west side, there's a little cemetery there that's got a very similar fence that you might recognize if you saw it. But, the footers are in concrete and, yeah. Yeah, okay, so the Evergreen Cemetery in New Haven, that's kind of what we're talking about.
The right-hand corner?
Yeah, maybe stylistically slightly different. You can have 2 rails at the top. I don't think that's something we need to spend more money on at all, but it may not cost more, I don't know, so, yeah.
So that one has a 2-rail fastener, right? The upper right-hand corner, am I getting that right? It's like one at the bottom and one at the top, and this spec says a 3-rail concealed fastener. Is that what that is? I'm not sure what the concealed fastener is.
No. This is language that all came off of a bid from Middlebury Fence Company that we got 18 months ago. But the Bristol Cemetery is similar. But these weren't to show what we wanted in a fence. These were to show what other surrounding cemeteries had. That's what the whole point of those photos were, so.
So you think you can do this within the budget, because you have a little layout here?
Good. Before the tariffs, we're hoping that we still can. We're gonna find out.
And you want to do it this fiscal year that we're in right
Yes.
now?
Yeah.
So it'd be complete by July 1st?
Correct.
Okay. So I see a hand up, Robert?
Yeah.
And how many posts are you going to have in the fence along the road?
I believe they're 48 inches. No, that doesn't sound right. They are 4 feet high. We had it. They come in sections of 5 feet, I want to say. It's 368 linear feet.
Okay.
And then you take out for the drive gate.
And when you talk about the 4 foot high, 4 foot from where, what's your benchmark that you're going to use? Because if you look at it now, you're going to see a mound of road sand that's built up over time. So are you gonna take all that out and start at the lower level, or are you gonna put it in the exact same spot that's there?
I don't think we're gonna do anything exactly the way that it is unless we are advised by the fence company that that's the way it should be. The chain link fence there predates everybody. We don't know, we have no idea how old it is. We can't find any real paperwork on it. There's some dates on some of the replacement posts, but that's not enough. So the road has definitely changed since the chain link has gone up. But one of the good things about the aluminum is that it does sit off the ground a bit so that
That's my
snow
question, how
can
high?
get off it. I think it's up to us to decide with the fence company what would be best.
Well, that fence has been there as long as I've been here.
Right.
Okay, now part of it's been replaced,
Yes,
where a car went through it.
yeah.
And I really like that fence because it really does a good job keeping the critters on the right side.
Yeah,
And I'm not a big person when it comes to aluminum fencing or what on that, especially now that I hear it's cast. So whether anybody just barely touches it, whether it's you or in a snowplow
yeah.
or any car, cast will break. So I don't know how durable it is. I've seen the one in Ferrisburg. I've seen the one on Spear Street you talked about. I'd like a taller fence, or I'd like it off the ground.
A little bit more.
Yes.
Yeah. One of the things we talked about too, excuse me, is talking to the fence people and seeing if it makes sense to march it back toward the east, even a foot, and get it away from green bush. Just that little bit could save it a lot of wear and tear. But, yeah, we'll see.
What's the cost of fixing the fences there?
The whole thing total?
You,
Only going by the estimate that we got to replace the front, and then we had the three sides from Sunshine.
Yeah.
You know, I want to say between 35 and 40,000 for the whole thing. Does that make sense?
fix what's there?
Oh, not to fix what's there, to replace what's there.
Uh,
To fix what's there, I don't know. Nobody even has really tried.
You know, you probably can't buy that fence anywhere else right now.
We can replace the chain link.
Huh?
We can replace the chain link.
That chain link is built when they built good fence.
Yeah, no,
Not the little thin stuff.
no, it's not. It's
And it's been
durable.
there a long time,
Yeah,
and that's the part I like about it.
yeah.
And spend that kind of money on something that, if it is aluminum, and it is cast aluminum, that's not a good choice.
That would only be the front section. We're talking about chain link for the other three sides.
The chain link that's there, you're gonna keep that.
We're gonna keep it for, until we have the money to replace it. And,
Well, what do you want to replace a good functional fence?
well, I mean, if you go back to the photographs, a lot of it isn't functional anymore. I mean, it's good for keeping your cows out, but it's not good for.
Everybody else inside don't get out either.
Well, we do have some little critters that get in there. I think they're gonna get in there anyway.
Right.
Yeah,
If the critters that get in there, you haven't got to worry about that, they're still gonna get there.
yeah.
So, your
Yeah.
fence or
I mean,
anybody.
that's our fence.
Yeah, a tree fell on that
Yep,
20 years ago.
Yeah.
You don't even see the stump anymore, that's how long ago it's been gone.
right.
And still, after being compromised like that, and all those bovines that stand on the other side of the fence and look at it, they stay where they belong.
Right.
So, it's not gonna cost very much to fix that one rail.
Well, we're not debating that, we're debating the,
Yeah, we are. That's how you get into these problems. You get down the road so far, Lee, there is no option other than just do it. So if you don't have a good plan, months ahead, years ahead, now's the time to talk about it.
I think it would be appropriate to look at fixing that fence on the perimeter, straightening it, replacing a post or two.
You're talking about the roadside fence?
No, the other three sides. With
other
respect to
three
the road, I mean, I think that would be an appropriate discussion with somebody before we commit to this replacing the three sides, because I think Robert's right in that you can't get chain link fence that's near that thick or that stout anymore, they just don't make it. But with respect to the the fence along the road, the specification doesn't call for a spacing of posts, and it doesn't call for a thickness or a weight of the material. I'm not sure how they measure cast aluminum, whether it's by pound or whether by weight or by gauge. I know if it's like rolled or something else, but I don't know cast how they do that. So I mean, there should be something so that when it goes out to bid, because you can buy fence sections in 5, 6, almost in foot increment up to about 10 or 12 feet, depending on the fence. So we should need to specify the spacing of the posts and the thickness of the material somehow. So,
Within the bid proposal.
yes, so when it goes out to bid, that somebody's not bidding 10-foot pieces, another person's not doing 6-foot pieces.
Getting apples to apples.
Yeah, right, of course, but if we don't know what the appropriate, post width and all of that is, how do we put the specs in there? It's kind of the tail wagging the dog a little bit, isn't it?
That's why I say that you work first before you put it in.
Well, you can pick one, say 8 feet. I mean, that's a standard fence post difference. And then when it goes out to bid, if it's a weird number, they'll let you know. Your bidders will let you know. Or you should maybe call, I mean, if Middlebury did your original bid, you ask them the question, what was the spacing for the posts? And how do you measure the thickness of the pickets?
Right.
Because they'll be interested, they'll probably want to answer your question because they'll want to make sure that someone's not going to lowball their bid with something thinner or different spacing.
And the lifespan will be important, without the snow plowing or cars. Because if that fence is over 60 years old and still there, what is the lifespan of a new, improved?
Yeah, you got 2 questions, one drive gate or 2 drive gates. In the beginning, it says that there's to replace existing fence and 2 drive gates. And then you've got inside, you've got 1 or 2.
Right, we'd like them to price it out both ways. We don't need 2 drive gates. So it'd be a good way to save some money to only have 1 rather than the 2 that we have now.
Vicki, did the mowing bid ask for push mower, not a riding mower? Does the lawn mowing allow riding lawn mowers in the West Burying Ground?
I thought it came down to deck size.
I just had somebody say to me today that they bid on something that they couldn't do a riding mower, but then it did.
Yeah.
The size of the deck. Okay. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, do we want more information for a standard for this RFP, or do we?
I think most of I would approve the RFP with the addition of a spacing of the posts and a thickness of the material, whether it's gauge or weight to the material to be added.
Spacing of posts, you said 8 feet. What
Well,
gauge?
I don't know if he measured cast pickets in gauge or weight. I've used cast iron pickets.
Because I've read a lot of the information.
I guess what we could do is approve this and then
So I'll prove it and you guys find out
Go to
what the
Middlebury
post
or-
spacing is
Do that.
and the gauge is and put it in the bid and go. It's not like you gotta come back and do it, but just clarify somehow what those 2 items are and then send it out.
Should we also ask, or is it too confusing to ask them what it would cost to repair the 3 sides of the chain link?
I'd leave that for a different,
yeah, I would too. It's not in this year's budget.
So the guy that's putting a new fence, you did bid on an old fence.
yeah, I think you're gonna find a guy with a torch and a shovel that's gonna do it for cheaper.
But again, the other question is the durability of this against the you know, near the road.
Say that
The
again?
durability of this is near the road, but it's, you know, what, and, I mean, I don't know, you know, like, I mean, if the snow hits it, you know, if a nice chunk hits it, what happens, and then where chain link fence would bounce, well, this isn't gonna bounce, and if it breaks it, now we gotta replace a section. I mean, it looks nice, but is it the function?
Somehow all the other cemeteries in Vermont get this, so I think we can figure it out. It has guarantees, it's made to take reviews, maybe not like chain link, but it's appropriate for the space that it's, you know, protecting. And because the pickets are a little farther apart, it's supposed to, a lot more is supposed to pass through it than get caught like it does on chain link. I mean, it has its advantages as well.
Yes, sir. What goes along the top? There's a lot of bicyclists that ride that road. There's a lot of traffic on that road. Is there a rail on the top? Is it pointy things? Is it?
That's a functionality and a design, you know, option. We can look at it, you can get little spiky ends like that, or there can be a smooth rail. It's, you know, there's options there.
And you can price that
Yeah.
options.
So that's in the spec, it says, including pricing options for flat top and press speed design. Which is the top, so.
Are we gonna set a date for the site visit?
And the request for
We
it?
did. February 11th or 12th?
12, it should be a.
So that'll be in here?
No, on site,
Oh, mine isn't.
on site. On site, on the site, at the site.
Yeah, but you're gonna.
Oh, yes, added, right, yes, added.
Request for bid.
Yeah.
You put in there?
Yes,
Okay.
What was the date?
the 12.
It's on this piece of
No,
paper.
February
12.
12.
February 12th.
This is for a site visit.
25th.
Oh, I see.
Deadline for-
Okay.
At
12 to 2 p.m.
2 p.m.
Okay.
So the site visit, is that what you said?
Yeah,
I had a couple of copies of this.
okay.
Colon after project description.
What date, what?
The first paragraph. It's just to,
The heading or the,
in line with all the others.
oh, okay. Oh, okay, yeah.
The second bullet under bid selection, capitalize T in town. And at the end of that line, delete the word "are" between wholly and in, and substitute "or."
Say that last one, say that last one again?
Between wholly and in at the end of that line, it should be wholly or in part, not "are" in part.
Okay.
Payment schedule, colon, insurance section needs a colon.
Yeah.
Workers' compensation is with an apostrophe after the S.
Yes, you're correct.
Bid and project specifications with a colon. The next.
Where's
flip
that?
the page, top page.
Cool.
In the bid form section, the first dollar line there, a space after materials and of.
Materials and, I'm sorry?
The word of.
Okay. Materials
And signature of contractor, another colon. Colon after the town contact on the back page. Section heading. And at the bottom, page 4 of 4.
Yeah.
And all of them, 1 of 4, 2 of 4, 3 of 4.
Thanks.
Fritz, do you want to make a motion then and add the 2 stipulations with the spacing and posts, spacing for posts and the thickness?
Second.
Good. I'll make a motion to approve the RFP for replacing the westerly boundary fence at the West Burying Ground with the addition of the post spacing and the gauge or thickness of the material added to the bid and project specification section.
Okay.
Another
And the other corrections that Matt made.
So that's been seconded?
Yes.
Dean?
There was some question about the height, either the bottom or the top. I guess I just wonder if that should be clear.
That will be handled in a site visit.
Okay.
I mean, if we really need to move some dirt, they can tear it out and Junior can make a pass.
Okay.
There may be a small extra expense for that, I would think, but it's kind of a, if I remember right, it's a curving hill, and you're trying to set square panels on a curve, so there's lots of little fussing and messing you have to do anyway to get it to look right.
Any other comments?
You made a mistake.
All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Okay. The next thing I see on the list is Roland's Place renewal of first-class bar license. Do we have to go into change to
Liquor Control Board,
Liquor Control Board?
motion that we reconvene as the control board.
Second that.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Is there a template to work from?
There is an application.
Okay. So, the application's here. It's a renewal. Payments here. From May 1st, 2019 to April 30th, 20. Somebody want to make a motion for this?
I'll make a motion to renew the first-class restaurant bar license to Roland's Place Incorporated to sell malt and Venus beverages for May 1st, 2019 till April 30th, 2020.
Okay. Does that require a signature by us or anything? Selectboard signs, I think it's everybody, okay? That was seconded. Any other comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. We should sign it, we're all here, this is the original. Looks like it's all of us.
Actually, the certificate of highway mileage does get signed.
What's that? Oh,
It's not enough line, but you can,
Oh, everyone should?
yeah.
which one is that?
The certificate of highway mileage.
Oh, here, you guys want to sign that one. Okay, that's been approved.
You are way ahead.
Oh, we're gonna be done early, all we have are minutes. Okay, so this is signatures,
Highway mileage.
okay. There you go.
Are you familiar with the specific latitude granted to cemetery commissions by the state statutes and what those are? I just remember a past cemetery commissioner was really vocal about that autonomy, but I can't remember the specifics of the statute, the autonomy from the select board as far as their.
Well, there is a statute, what they can do. We approve budget,
Right.
but they have autonomy, and they have to report annually to either us or the auditors, I think, as I remember.
As far as their activity.
Yeah. You'll straighten them out, Robert. Is there a motion to end this and go back?
Motion to reconvene as the select board.
Right, there you go.
And
Is that seconded?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, the last thing I see here that's on the agenda is the minutes of January 14th.
Motion to approve the minutes of January 14th is maybe amended. Second.
Okay. Related to updates, Dean, is the transition from Kathy to What's Monty's first name?
Lynn.
Lynn, is that all been worked out?
Pretty much, this will be Kathy's last official select board meeting. She has agreed to do some substituting on a case-by-case basis.
Are you gonna do town meeting? What's that mean?
Will you do town meeting?
If I'm asked, I guess so.
Okay, I just did. No, I don't know. I'll look it up today.
I would just say on 223, it's the estimated tax rate increase. It doesn't get set until August.
Did we get the school reports, Dean, for the town?
They provided a packet, a 6-page packet that goes with the town report. And they do have their own report that's a standalone. I don't know how that's distributed or when, but.
So we didn't get any of the employee or the pay stuff?
We did, that's in our town report.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Any other comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. I have a question for updates. Dean, is there more discussion? I saw an email about the medical center and some negotiations. Is that just making us aware, or?
Yeah, that was just making you aware. They're still in front of the planning commission for sketch plan review. So that was just FYI.
So is a potential of being on the roadway being on the west side? Is that right?
I didn't quite follow the exact layout,
Okay,
but
the fire
there might
department?
be a common roadway on the west side of the health center, east side of the fire station, that would be shared by the fire station, the health center, and Marilyn Richardson's lot.
And 25 lot parking spaces, is that public use, or couldn't you figure that out? Just a couple sentences.
Yeah, I didn't see that exactly, but I imagine it might be a combination.
Okay. Is there any other business to be brought before the board? Yes.
I want to personally thank Kathy Furr for her long and very precise and attentive service to the town.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Great minutes. Very thorough. We go back to them all the time. I'm surprised how much we go back to them. So we're going to see you maybe at the town meeting, or does that have to be worked out between the two of you?
I'll just be with
Okay.
I have to twist her arm a little bit.
Okay.
Better hurry to leave town.
Is there a final motion of the evening?
Motion adjourned.
Second. All in favor? Yeah, okay. Wow.